It's Emil Guillermo. Emil Amok to you. Welcome to my Takeout, my Emil Amok's Takeout, my takes on all things considerable. And if you are on the race beat, if you cover civil rights, if you cover people of color, if you're right across race lines, different communities, there's this one story, the death of the Reverend Jesse Jackson. I mean, there are other stories, of course. Another Nancy Guthrie update, something at the Olympics, Kilmar Abrego Garcia thing that says they can't retry him or can't hold him again. I mean, that's a positive. But if you cover the race beat, this is the story, Jesse Jackson. Because I don't know if before Jesse Jackson, there really was that generational bridge to get us from Martin Luther King and, the civil rights era into the application of the civil rights era. How are we going to apply it? And how was it that in 84, when Jackson first ran for president, why was it that even then civil rights was just seen as a black-white thing? It wasn't seen as black, white, and Asian or black, white, and Hispanic. The Hispanic thing didn't really happen until 5 years later. In 89, they said, oh, we've got all these Hispanics coming in. We better be talking about black, whites, and Hispanics. Asians weren't even in the equation in 1984. And I picked 1984 because that was the year that Jesse Jackson decided he was going to run for president. And it really, if you think about it, I mean, Asian Americans know about Vincent Chin. There are people who are involved in the Vincent Chin movement who are fighting for his rights when he was murdered, right? Fighting for justice for Vincent Chin. And they remember that there were civil rights attorneys at the time who did not think that civil rights applied to Asians. This is back in like the early 80s. So the 80s, if you grew up in the 90s or were born in the 90s or the 2000s and you're like maybe young, in your 20s now, this is the reality for Asian Americans. In the 80s, there were people who actually said, civil rights? I mean, we know about black and white. Does that include other people of color? Now people say BIPOC, they say people of color. But before Jesse Jackson, there was nothing. I know, hard to believe, right? All right, that's what I'm going to get into today. Thank you for joining me. This is my Takeout, my Emil Amok's Takeout. And you can read my columns on theinquirer.net. Also, I'll put something on Substack, Emil Amok Guillermo, Emil Amok's Takeout. You can also see it. I wrote something on President's Day yesterday, post-president thoughts about the current president. And the current president has a lot to say about Jesse Jackson. Like, he's my buddy. We are friends. This is like typical racist stuff, right? Oh, my black friend is dead. Oh, here's my black friend. I mean, it's the truth, right? Oh, he was friendly during those times with Jeffrey Epstein and there was Jackson in New York City, making friends with Trump at the time. But Trump, who is trying his best to say, hey, look, I'm embracing Jesse Jackson, in his Truth Social post, he tries to say, here's Jesse Jackson, what a guy. Oh, but that Barack Hussein Obama, and anytime someone mentions Barack Hussein Obama, that's like, what is wrong? Who is this guy? Anyway, Trump is kind of trying to have his cake and eat it too. I don't think it's working. I see right through it. I hope you do. But everyone today has a response to Jesse Jackson, especially like if you're an Asian American, if you're a Filipino Asian American like myself. And I wrote this for Inquirer.net, should be posted later today. I remember the night in San Francisco when Jesse Jackson said, "We must come together." It was 1984. And I remember the 1980s, I just lived through the first iteration of affirmative action. I mean, the Civil Rights Act, right? 64. But the first iteration, 10 years to 74 to, 84, getting some pushback. People wondering, is this, I mean, people didn't know what that was, right? Equalities, integration. They were working their way through that. And then I was really a second generation son of a Filipino immigrant. So I was seeing myself as an American. Treat me like one, right? Treat me like a second generation. Don't treat me like the first. Don't treat me like my father. I'm not my father. I'm me. Well, that's one of the things. In the 80s, I still hadn't processed what was going on. And my politics were still evolving. I mean, I figured, well, I'm an American. This is capitalist America. I should just fall in line, right? I mean, there's so many Filipino Americans who were like that. But then came Jesse Jackson. Oh, and around this time also, I had a pre Bruno Mars perm, right? And then I saw Jesse Jackson speak, and it wasn't just vanity, the perm. There was a real connection. And that was something. I saw Jesse Jackson speak in the 1984 Democratic National Convention. It was at Moscone Center. And I really wasn't really covering the speech. I was there covering all the convention. Other reporters with the organization I was with were focusing in on the speech. I was really more talking about color and how the media was handling it. But there I was. I wasn't black. I wasn't Southern. I wasn't even sure where Filipino Americans even belonged in the spectrum, right? And then Jesse Jackson walked to the podium, and I realized that my perm was more than just a look. I had this pre-Bruno Mars perm, when it was really tight, it looked like Jerry curls, it was like, I know, hard to believe. But Jackson, he didn't just speak to the black community, right? He spoke through it. And it was like he had this strong signal that was enough to reach anyone who ever felt outside of the room, meaning outside of the room of American politics, of American society, anyone on the fringes. And this is what he said. He said, "Our flag is red, white, and blue, but our nation is rainbow. Red, yellow, brown, black, and white." He was saying something that we may have felt, but we had no one saying that on the national stage. People locally may have said that, but here was someone on the national stage saying that. We were the rainbow. We were red, yellow, brown, black, and white. We're all precious in God's sight. That's what he said. I mean, that's a jaw-dropping line. And he got a full 15 seconds of applause. I mean, people were ready for this message. People in the auditorium in Moscone Center, 1984. He called America a quilt. Not a single cloth, not one color, not one texture, a quilt stitched together from differences that somehow are held by a common thread. And this is the metaphor, right? It's the metaphor that continues on the idea of civil rights from the 60s, the mid 60s through the 70s, and now the mid 80s. And there I was, a young Filipino American, Asian American reporter covering this, just thinking, here I am in my suit, my perm, covering this thing. And it was reflecting changes in society that I don't think people really felt. They didn't really feel at that time. And then Jackson had it laid it out for America to imagine. It was the imagination of a new America. The white, the Hispanic, the black, the Arab, the Jew, the woman, the Native American, the small farmer, the business person, the environmentalist, the peace activist, the youth, the old, the lesbian, the gay, and the disabled make up the American quilt. I mean, it was the first time anyone had laid it out like that. Here was the litany of America, the American quilt. The white, the Hispanic, the black, the Arab, the Jew, the woman, the Native American, the small farmer, the business person, the environmentalist, the peace activist, the youth, the old, the lesbian, the gay, and the disabled. I mean, it was, man. And suddenly there I was, a Filipino American, an Asian American journalist trying to understand where I belonged. Hearing a black preacher explain that the question wasn't where do you fit in, but how do we hold together? And that's the moment when he's been called the bridge. But the bridge appeared, the drawbridge came down, and we were asked to walk across it. This Rainbow Coalition, it's a powerful idea. And no one before Jackson really laid it out quite that way, that it is a rainbow, it is a coalition, and that's the way you win. That's the way you win an election. That's the way, that's the electorate, that's who is governed. It should be who governs as well. And that hit me. I'm a Filipino kid in the seats there at Moscone. The Rainbow Coalition message wasn't really just theoretical. It was radical inclusion, right? His campaign talked about all the people who didn't usually see themselves as part of this convention stage. And I remember thinking, did he just say us too? Because Asian Americans in the 80s were still learning about political visibility. In 1984, some saw civil rights really simply as black and white. Asians were but a footnote, and Filipinos were mixed in somehow, somewhere. Oh, Marcos was big then, so maybe, we're part of this American history because the U.S., Reagan, Bush, they all supported Marcos. Our first colony, right? We're trying to work through the stereotypes. We're seen as hardworking, quiet, grateful. The model minority myth was a polite way of saying, just stay in your lane. Stay in your lane. But Jackson's speech didn't ask the powers that be for permission. And for the rest of us who may not have realized we were in the fight for recognition, Jackson didn't ask for permission either. He demanded solidarity. He knew that was the way it was going to work. That's the way that we were going to win. If we had a potential to win, that was the way. And that night, I felt so connected to the Black freedom struggle. not as an observer, but as a participant in the same unfinished project. And this is something that was never really dawned on me as a kid. I went to schools in San Francisco that were under NAACP, um, you know, decrees, and that there was forced busing. But it never dawned on me that, oh yeah, I'm part of this too. I mean, we lived in a fairly middle class for that time in the 70s, San Francisco, in the Mission, mostly working class Irish, Italian, very few blacks. In fact, the blacks in my neighborhood, or they're in an adjacent neighborhood, had to be bused into my elementary school. But when I heard Jackson, I said, oh, wait a minute. I'm part of that legacy too. And that's when it hit me. And I thought, if the black community could force America to confront its moral contradictions, maybe the rest of us had room to step forward as well. Because it wasn't just black and white, right? It was all of us who are on the outside. We are one, not because our experiences are identical, but because injustice is contagious, and so is courage. I mean, that's what we needed. And at that time in 1984, San Francisco was ripe for all this. The LGBTQ community was getting hit by AIDS hard. There were anti-war protests, peace protests. There were labor organizers. Immigrant communities were establishing new identities. Immigration, we're in the midst of immigration reform, positive for a change. But the convention was still kind of messy and contentious. And here comes Jackson. It was almost like the perfect time for a speech like Jackson's in 1984. He stood there as the first black presidential candidate to speak from a major party convention podium. And you could feel the weight of that moment. Like the country briefly paused to imagine a wider definition of American. And this was the definition that Jackson was giving: the quilt. As a Filipino American, I thought about my parents' immigration journey, how we were always included in laws that were anti-black. Those anti-miscegenation laws that prevented mixed marriage between black and white, well, they affected us. They affect the Filipino too. The main message for Filipinos was simply to work hard and stay invisible. And now here was this preacher saying visibility wasn't vanity, it was survival. And we had to fight for it. He wasn't asking people to shrink their identities. He was asking people to bring them forward. So we weren't talking about a symbolic connection. We were talking about a personal connection. And this is what Jackson did with that speech. You know, and I just didn't realize how it changed my whole attitude. You know, it wasn't black political rhetoric. It was rhetoric for people who were deemed outside and who wanted to be a part, who wanted inclusion. I'm talking about Asian Americans and Filipino Americans, that it was time to stop apologizing and just speak up and be present and be loud. And when Jackson did that, you know, it wasn't like this quilt was just thrown out there. It was presented to the American public, and then to those of us whose future was at stake. He said, here's the needle, here's the thread. Let's make this together. So what do we have? We have right now, look, that's 84. And where are we now, 42 years later? God, hard to believe, huh? 84, 42. And how far? Sort of. We've come far, and now we're regressing. So, Jackson simply came along at a time when he acknowledged that pain, exclusion, anger, and then argued that progress required coalition. We had to fight together. He said we could survive without each other, but we couldn't win without each other. We needed each other. And so solidarity becomes the winning strategy. It wasn't a matter of being sentimental for equality, sentimental for freedom. It was the only way to fight back. And so I understood that. The rainbow, seeing different colors. We speak different languages, but we pray differently. But the thread is the same. And Jackson concluded, we must come together. Wow. Unity, right? Which is so strange because in 2 generations, we've devolved back into disunity, into chaos, into everyone going their separate ways. I mean, Jackson, to be able to hear Jackson give that speech, I mean, it was a privilege to be in the room. Although way back, I mean, I didn't have, I was in the arena. But this is something, if you were only born in the 80s, 90s, the 2000s, you got to remember how it was back then and what it was like to hear Jackson's voice at that convention and how to this day it still reverberates. It still speaks the truth. And you look to see how the current administration, CFDT 34, convicted felon Donald Trump 34 counts, how he, because that's his name, how he has used this moment to post pictures of himself with Jackson and say, hey, look, forget about the Central Park Five. Look, I'm friends with all blacks. Except that Barack Hussein Obama, he says that. And, we have to understand that this is Trump's way of trying to deny the racist bent of MAGA and to show, hey, I got black friends other than Clarence Thomas. This is the administration that has made diversity, equity, inclusion, dirty words. This is the same administration that has essentially banned affirmative action, that has tried to erase black and ethnic history as too negative about the American experience, because the American experience is just positive, right? That's all that this administration wants. Oh, we just want the positive things. And of course, the most sycophantic, Department of Defense, Hegseth, Kristi Noem, Pam Bondi, they're leading the charge toward this eraser of the truth and the replacement of that with Trump truth, which is a fake truth. That's what Trump peddles. The rainbow truth is what we should understand. And with the passing of Jackson, glom onto today, because the rainbow truth of Jackson still holds. Jackson's truth imagined America as a living, breathing quilt, a symbol of unity in the shape of our democracy. No matter how Trump and MAGA attack it, Jackson's truth holds and continues to keep hope alive. Some thoughts about Jesse Jackson. I'm lucky that first convention in '84, he gave that speech. He gave us the quilt image. He gave us a new definition of an America that makes sense for a growing, diverse America. And later on, I didn't get to the '88 convention, but he said the same thing there. He had 2 tries at the presidency. But everyone knows then when Barack Obama was elected, and Obama has even acknowledged it today in his comments, that he was only there because the person who made it possible was Jesse Jackson. And that's how important he was. For Asian Americans, everyone said, well, where's our Jesse Jackson? Was it Norm Mineta, who won reparations for Japanese Americans? Possibly. But Norm didn't have that same kind of dynamism as Jesse Jackson. Norm wasn't that much of a rebel. He was a unifier, though. He brought people together from both sides of the aisle. And that was the one thing when I worked with Mineta that I thought was his unifying factor, that he could bring the left and the right together. But then sometimes that leaves you not going far enough in one direction. And sometimes that leaves you kind of like sort of mired in a kind of sameness. That's one of the problems with compromise. It could be good and bad. But Jackson's was really, for the first time, looking at race and trying to bring us together and trying to open up this sense of this was not a black and white thing. It included Hispanics, it included Asians, Native Americans, women. The litany's there. In that '84 speech, it was an eye-opener. And as I said, while it seems like we're going backwards with Trump, the truth and the memory of Jackson should be enough to keep hope alive. I mean, Jackson's had some tough health issues the last year and a half or so. And in some ways, people with some foresight have been saying goodbye to Jesse Jackson for the last 3 years. At the Democratic National Convention, that was quite a tribute to him. You know, in the Harris Convention, and even before then with Biden. But you didn't really feel like, oh, he's gone. But now that he is gone, he's officially gone. His son, Jesse Jackson Jr., said, oh, I can't believe he's a was and not an is. So it's sinking in slowly. But the fact is, his memory and what he stood for doesn't go away. Stays with us. That's his power. Power of the Reverend Jesse Jackson. I was taken by that speech, but it helped evolve my politics. I was in a strange place at that time. I was shifting over from hard news to softer news, working on the arts, working in opinion. I got married for the first time. That was that was tough. That marriage didn't last. So it came to hear Jackson's speech came at a difficult time for me, but I had to hear that message because it reminded me about the work that had to be done and where we were headed as a country. And still not there yet. I like Jesse Jackson. You know, his birthday's like, he's an October baby, a Libra. That's a good sign. He was a spoken word artist par excellence. I never got to interview or speak to him, but that's all right. I just had to listen to him. And that was the important thing. All right, we're talking about Jesse Jackson. Thank you for listening. Repeat if you wish. Use your finger and push it back. Catch this on YouTube. Catch it on Facebook, on my Facebook channels, on X. Also, send it to your friends. I'll be posting my column on Substack as well as theinquirer.net. But laughable, some of the response, say from Donald Trump, who I guess is trying to point out that, hey, I may be a pedophile protector, but I like this black guy. I don't know. It's like to watch Trump's Truth Social and see him post all these pictures of black guys and then say, oh, yeah, Jesse Jackson was great. Barack Hussein Obama is not great, is just kind of transparent, right? Anyway, we're going to end with a little love and kindness because, you know, love makes the world go round. A little meditation. Sharon Salzberg. I borrow from Sharon Salzberg. And so, as I wish for me, I wish for you. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And may you live with ease. Emil Guillermo here. Till next time. Mahal.